Your soulmate's feelings will be revealed within this date. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because something invisible but powerful is aligning around your love life, something that didn't begin today but has been quietly building behind the scenes. And if you felt emotionally sensitive lately, more aware of signs, more reflective about love, that's not coincidence, that's spiritual timing activating. And listen to this. The universe does not stir your emotions without purpose, it prepares hearts before revelations arrive, and your heart needs this right now because there is a specific window of time forming, not a random calendar day, but a divine alignment moment when your soulmate's inner world can no longer stay hidden. And don't scroll, because this part matters. Your soulmate has been holding feelings inside, not because they don't care, but because fear, pride, past wounds, and uncertainty created emotional silence. And listen to this, silence is only temporary when truth is strong. Eventually the pressure becomes too heavy to carry, and that pressure is rising now. And your heart needs this right now because you've been changing too, you've been choosing yourself more, protecting your peace, stepping into emotional maturity, and that shift sent a signal through the connection. And don't scroll, because when one soul elevates, the other feels the pull, even if they don't understand it consciously. And listen to this. The signs have already started appearing around you. Angel numbers showing up when you think about them, 1111 when you imagine a future together, 222 when you question timing, 555 when you feel change approaching, and your heart needs this right now because these numbers are not random, they are spiritual markers letting you know alignment is active. And don't scroll, because your soulmate has been emotionally restless lately, replaying moments with you, remembering how different your energy felt compared to others, feeling that familiar pull they can't explain. And listen to this, that pull is recognition. Soul recognition doesn't fade, it waits until the timing is right to speak again. And your heart needs this right now because the universe is not preparing this reveal to confuse you, it's preparing it to bring clarity, closure, or connection to a higher level. And don't scroll, because this reveal is not about dramatic confession alone, it's about emotional truth finally surfacing. And listen to this, truth doesn't always arrive loudly, sometimes it comes through honest conversation, unexpected vulnerability, or subtle actions that reveal deeper intention. And your heart needs this right now because the date window approaching is connected to emotional readiness, not impatience, not chasing, not forcing outcomes. And don't scroll, because forcing love blocks alignment, while trust opens the door. And listen to this, you don't need to know the exact number on the calendar to feel the shift, you'll recognize it by the energy, by the calm anticipation, by the sense that something is about to move. And your heart needs this right now. Because you are not meant to wait in anxiety, you are meant to stay grounded, present, and emotionally open. And don't scroll, because the universe is positioning you to receive honesty without fear, without confusion, without repeating old patterns. And listen to this, your soulmate's heart is being softened, their defenses lowering, their emotional walls thinning, because growth is happening on both sides. And your heart needs this right now because the reason this reveal is coming now and not before is because you're finally ready to hear it without losing yourself. And don't scroll, because this moment is about alignment, not attachment, about clarity, not fantasy. And listen to this, if you've been dreaming more vividly, feeling emotional waves, or sensing their energy unexpectedly, those are signs the emotional cord between you is active. And your heart needs this right now because spiritual connections communicate before physical ones do. And don't scroll, because part 1 ends here for a reason, because the next phase reveals what kind of truth is coming and how to prepare your heart so you don't block what's meant to arrive. Listen to this, stay open, stay calm, stay aligned, because this reveal is closer than you think. Stay with this moment, because what's unfolding now carries a deeper layer of meaning than simple timing or coincidence, and if you've felt a quiet pull toward reflection lately, a sense that something important is approaching without fully knowing what it is, that's not imagination, it's awareness expanding, and this stage is about emotional preparation, not just for your soulmate, but for you as well. Because revelations don't arrive to unready hearts, they arrive when both sides are capable of holding truth without fear, and while you've been growing more grounded, learning how to trust yourself, strengthening emotional boundaries, your soulmate has been navigating an inner shift of their own, questioning old habits, reevaluating priorities, realizing that holding feelings inside no longer brings peace, and this realization is creating pressure to speak, not out of urgency, but out of emotional necessity. And that necessity doesn't come from loneliness, it comes from clarity. Because clarity removes excuses and highlights what truly matters, and what matters to them now is honesty, even if it feels uncomfortable, and this honesty is what the universe has been preparing both of you for, because truth without emotional maturity creates chaos, while truth with growth creates transformation, and this stage is about transformation, not shock, not drama, but evolution. And you may notice signs around you reflecting this shift. Recurring numbers appearing when you're in reflective moments, unexpected memories surfacing, dreams that feel symbolic. These aren't distractions, they're indicators that emotional timelines are aligning again, and alignment always brings opportunity, not guarantees, but opportunity for growth, healing, and deeper connection. And your role in this phase is not to wait anxiously or analyze every detail, it's to remain present, emotionally available without attachment, grounded without detachment, because presence keeps your energy clear, and clear energy allows truth to arrive without distortion, and this stage often feels quiet externally, because most of the work is happening internally, on both sides, and internal change always comes before external expression, and that expression may come through conversation, through action, through vulnerability, or through realization, but whatever form it takes, it will feel different from the past, because you're different now, more aware, more stable, more emotionally prepared. And that preparation matters, because it allows you to respond consciously. Instead of reacting emotionally, and conscious response changes outcomes instantly, and this is why the universe delayed this reveal until now, not to test patience, but to ensure both hearts could meet at a higher level, and this higher level doesn't require perfection, it requires honesty, emotional responsibility, and openness to growth, and those qualities are strengthening on both sides, creating a foundation strong enough to hold what's coming, and you may feel moments of emotional release, sudden clarity, or calm anticipation, and those feelings are signs that resistance is softening, making space for truth to surface naturally, and this process isn't meant to rush you into decisions, it's meant to prepare you for clarity, because clarity is powerful, it removes confusion, reveals direction, and opens new pathways, and once clarity arrives, the connection will never feel the same again. Not necessarily because it becomes romantic instantly, but because it becomes real. And reality is where healing, growth, and authentic connection live, and this stage is only the beginning of that shift, because the next phase involves movement, not just internal change, and that movement is what makes the reveal tangible, not symbolic, and that's when you'll truly understand why the universe brought you to this moment now. Remain present with this unfolding energy, because what's happening now is not about waiting anymore, it's about alignment preparing to move into action, and if you've noticed your emotions settling into a strange calm mixed with expectation, that's not coincidence, it's the quiet before momentum begins, and this stage centers on inner truth becoming too strong to stay hidden, especially for your soulmate, who has been carrying feelings beneath the surface longer than they admit, and those feelings have been reshaping their thoughts, influencing their decisions, and slowly pushing them toward honesty, not out of pressure, but out of necessity, because holding truth inside eventually becomes heavier than expressing it, and that weight is shifting now, and while this is happening on their side, you've been stepping into a deeper level of emotional readiness, learning how to listen to your intuition, strengthening self-trust, and becoming more selective with where you invest your energy, and this readiness matters, because it determines how you receive what's coming, and reception is just as important as revelation, and this phase often feels quiet externally, but internally it's active, because emotional preparation doesn't make noise, it builds silently through awareness, reflection, and growth, and you may notice subtle signals around you reflecting this change, heightened intuition, meaningful coincidences, recurring numbers appearing at reflective moments. These aren't random, they're indicators that emotional timelines are converging again, and convergence brings opportunity, not obligation, opportunity to approach this connection differently than before, with more maturity, more honesty, more clarity, and this is the opportunity being offered now, not to repeat the past, but to transform it, and transformation requires patience, openness, and willingness to face truth without defensiveness, and your soulmate is being guided toward that space. Now, even if it feels uncomfortable, because discomfort often signals growth, and growth creates movement, and movement changes outcomes, and your role during this phase is not to chase answers, but to remain grounded, emotionally present, and open without attachment, because openness allows clarity to arrive without distortion, and distortion comes from fear, while clarity comes from calm awareness. And calm awareness is what you've been building through your own growth, and that growth is preparing you to receive this reveal without losing your emotional balance, and this stage isn't about dramatic declarations yet, it's about emotional readiness reaching a tipping point, where silence no longer feels aligned, and honesty becomes the natural next step, and when that step happens, it won't feel forced, it will feel inevitable, like something that was always meant to be said finally finding its moment. And that moment is approaching now, not because time passed, but because awareness matured, and awareness is the true catalyst for change, and you may feel this shift through emotional release, sudden clarity, or a deep sense of peace, and these feelings are signs that resistance is dissolving, creating space for truth to surface, and once truth appears, the dynamic between you will change, because truth reshapes perception, and perception influences behavior, and behavior shapes reality. And this chain reaction is what the universe has been preparing behind the scenes, and the next phase will reveal how this internal shift begins expressing itself outwardly, through conversation, action, or emotional openness, and that's when the reveal becomes real, not just felt. Stay centered as this next phase begins unfolding, because what's happening now carries movement energy, the kind that doesn't rush forward but steadily shifts direction, and if you felt a sense of readiness building inside you, like you're emotionally prepared for whatever truth arrives, that's not coincidence, it's preparation completing, and this stage is about expression, not through dramatic announcements, but through subtle, meaningful actions that reveal intention before words ever do, and your soulmate is beginning to act differently now, not impulsively, but with awareness, choosing to engage more openly, showing interest through consistency, offering presence instead of distance, and these choices matter, because behavior reflects emotional truth more accurately than words alone, and while this change is happening on their side, you're also stepping into a more grounded emotional state, one where you no longer feel the need to force outcomes, overanalyze timing, or seek constant reassurance, and this grounded energy is important, because it creates emotional safety, and emotional safety allows honesty to surface without fear, and this stage often feels calmer than anticipation because it's not driven by longing, it's driven by clarity, and clarity brings steadiness, and steadiness supports growth, and you may begin noticing shifts in the way interactions feel. Conversations becoming more intentional, moments carrying more meaning, exchanges feeling more sincere. These are signs that alignment is moving from the inner world into reality, and what your heart needs to understand now is that revelation doesn't always come as a single moment. Sometimes it unfolds through repeated interactions, consistent effort, and emotional presence over time, and this gradual unfolding creates stability, because it allows both people to adjust emotionally without overwhelm. And stability is essential, because it supports healthy connection rather than emotional turbulence, and this stage marks the transition from emotional preparation into practical movement, where inner awareness begins shaping visible behavior, and this transformation is powerful, because it changes the dynamic from waiting into participating, from observing into engaging, and engagement builds momentum, and momentum reshapes direction, and direction determines outcome. And this is why this phase feels significant, because it's where possibility begins turning into reality, not through fantasy, but through consistent action, and as this process continues, you may notice your own emotional responses changing, less reactivity, more patience, less attachment to outcome, more trust in the unfolding. These shifts reflect growth, not emotional distance, because growth allows you to remain open without losing your balance, and balance keeps energy clear, and clear energy allows truth to arrive without distortion, and distortion comes from fear, while clarity comes from calm awareness, and calm awareness is what you've been cultivating, and that cultivation is paying off now, because it allows this connection to evolve without repeating old patterns, and this stage is not about rushing toward a conclusion, it's about building a new foundation, one rooted in honesty, mutual respect, and shared growth, and this foundation feels different from the past, because it's not built on uncertainty, it's built on awareness, and awareness creates trust, and trust allows vulnerability to deepen without fear, and vulnerability strengthens emotional bonds, and emotional bonds create partnership, and partnership supports longevity, and this natural progression reflects alignment rather than coincidence, and alignment always feels steadier than chaos, calmer than emotional extremes, and more sustainable than intensity alone, and as this alignment continues strengthening, you may feel a sense of calm certainty replacing doubt, not because everything is guaranteed, but because you trust yourself to handle whatever truth arrives, and that self-trust is powerful, because it ensures that the connection you nurture reflects your authentic needs rather than old emotional habits, and everything you've experienced up to this point has been preparing you for this phase, where emotional readiness meets opportunity, and opportunity meets action, and action shapes the next chapter of this story. Remain open as this next layer unfolds, because what's happening now carries a sense of momentum building beneath the surface, not loud or dramatic, but steady and purposeful, the kind that slowly reshapes direction without creating chaos, and if you felt a quiet shift inside yourself, like your heart is stronger yet softer at the same time, that's not random, it's emotional integration taking place. And integration changes how you respond to connection, because it allows you to act from awareness rather than impulse, and during this phase your soulmate is beginning to move from internal realization into outward expression, learning how to show interest through consistency instead of hesitation, learning how to offer presence instead of emotional distance, and learning how to communicate with sincerity instead of uncertainty. And these adjustments may seem small individually, but together they create powerful movement, because repeated intentional actions build trust, and trust strengthens emotional bonds, and emotional bonds deepen connection, and while this growth is happening on their side, you're also stepping into a new emotional posture, one rooted in self-respect, discernment, and calm confidence, and this posture matters, because it sets the tone for how the connection evolves, shifting the dynamic from imbalance into mutual effort, and mutual effort creates cooperation. And cooperation allows two people to build something meaningful together instead of pulling in opposite directions, and this stage often feels calmer than anticipation because it's not fueled by uncertainty, it's fueled by clarity, and clarity creates steadiness, and steadiness supports emotional security, and emotional security allows vulnerability to exist without fear, and vulnerability deepens intimacy, and intimacy strengthens connection, and this chain reaction is what's forming now, quietly and naturally, without forcing outcomes, and as this process continues, you may notice changes in your own emotional responses, less urge to control situations, more willingness to trust the flow, less anxiety about timing, more presence in the moment. These shifts reflect growth, not detachment, because growth allows you to remain open without sacrificing your peace, and peace creates space for alignment, and alignment allows connection to unfold naturally rather than being pushed forward prematurely, and this natural unfolding feels different from waiting or chasing. It feels like participating in something meaningful, like co-creating a shared emotional direction. And co-creation requires communication, mutual respect, and emotional honesty, and those qualities are becoming more present now, shaping the future of this connection in a healthier way than before, and this stage marks the transition from emotional readiness into emotional investment, where both sides begin contributing effort rather than simply feeling attraction, and investment creates responsibility, and responsibility builds commitment, and commitment shapes long-term outcomes. And as this unfolds, you may notice your standards becoming clearer, your boundaries becoming stronger, your values becoming more important than momentary emotion, and these changes are essential, because they ensure that the connection you build reflects who you've become rather than who you used to be, and your soulmate senses this shift, because emotional maturity creates a different energy, one that attracts sincerity rather than games, and sincerity encourages openness. And openness strengthens trust, and trust allows the connection to grow deeper without fear of collapse. And this stage isn't about rushing toward the reveal, it's about creating the emotional environment where the reveal can happen safely and honestly, and that environment is being built through patience, awareness, and consistent effort on both sides, and while this process may feel slow at times, slow growth creates stronger roots, and stronger roots support lasting connection. And everything you've experienced up to this point has been shaping you for this phase, preparing you to receive truth without losing your balance, without repeating old emotional cycles, without sacrificing your well-being, and now that preparation is becoming visible through emotional stability, intentional communication, and shared direction, creating a foundation that can support what's coming next, and what's coming next will not feel chaotic or overwhelming, it will feel steady, aligned, and purposeful. Because this connection is no longer being built on uncertainty, it's being built on awareness and mutual growth. Remain attentive as this next phase takes shape, because what's unfolding now carries a different frequency, not anticipation alone, but movement guided by intention. The kind that transforms emotional awareness into real-life shifts, and if you've sensed a deeper calm settling into your body, paired with a quiet sense of readiness, that's not accidental, it's alignment becoming embodied, and embodiment changes how connection develops, because it replaces hesitation with presence and replaces guessing with clarity. And during this stage your soulmate is experiencing an internal realignment, letting go of outdated emotional defenses, questioning old habits of silence, and realizing that withholding truth no longer feels protective, it feels limiting, and this realization is reshaping how they approach communication, how they show care, and how they choose to engage emotionally, and you may begin noticing subtle evidence of this transformation: increased attentiveness, thoughtful timing, a stronger desire to connect meaningfully. Not grand gestures, but reliable patterns that reflect genuine effort, and these patterns matter, because consistency builds emotional safety, and emotional safety allows openness to flourish without fear, and while these changes occur on their side, you're stepping further into self-alignment, where your decisions feel more grounded, your boundaries more natural, and your expectations clearer, and this alignment is powerful, because it shifts the dynamic from emotional uncertainty into mutual stability, and stability creates space for deeper connection without pressure, and this stage often feels steadier than previous ones because it's no longer driven by emotional highs or lows, it's guided by awareness and mutual respect, and respect transforms interactions, making conversations feel more sincere, exchanges more balanced, and moments together more intentional. And these shifts signal that the connection is evolving beyond surface-level attraction into something more substantial. And what your heart needs to understand now is that meaningful connection grows through shared responsibility, not fantasy, through effort, not assumption, through presence, not avoidance, and those elements are becoming more visible now, shaping the foundation beneath what's forming. And as this foundation strengthens, you may notice your own emotional responses changing: less impulsive reaction, more thoughtful reflection, less attachment to outcome, more comfort with the present moment. These changes reflect maturity, not emotional withdrawal, because maturity allows you to remain open while protecting your peace, and peace creates emotional clarity, and emotional clarity allows you to make choices aligned with your values rather than driven by fear, and this alignment ensures that the connection you nurture reflects growth instead of repeating old patterns. And this stage marks the transition from emotional readiness into emotional embodiment, where what you've learned about yourself begins guiding your behavior automatically, without forcing effort. And this embodiment creates authenticity, and authenticity attracts sincerity, and sincerity builds trust, and trust strengthens emotional bonds, and emotional bonds support partnership, and partnership allows long-term connection to thrive, and this natural progression reflects evolution rather than coincidence. And evolution always feels steadier than emotional turbulence, more supportive than unpredictability, and more sustainable than intensity alone. And as this evolution continues, you may notice your intuition becoming sharper, guiding you toward healthier interaction, clearer communication, and stronger boundaries, and these intuitive signals are important, because they help you navigate this reconnection with awareness instead of reacting to old emotional triggers, and this awareness creates emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence allows connection to deepen without unnecessary conflict. And this stage is not about rushing toward a final outcome, it's about strengthening the emotional structure that will support whatever unfolds next, and strengthening requires patience, honesty, and mutual effort, not perfection, but consistency, and consistency is becoming more present now through repeated actions, reliable presence, and emotional availability. And these qualities build a connection that can withstand challenges instead of collapsing under pressure, and while this process unfolds, you may feel moments of quiet clarity, sudden understanding, or emotional release, and these experiences are signs that inner resistance is dissolving, creating space for truth to arrive without distortion, and once truth begins flowing freely, the dynamic between you will continue shifting, because honesty reshapes perception, and perception influences behavior, and behavior shapes reality. And this chain reaction is what the universe has been preparing through timing and growth, and everything you've experienced up to this point has been guiding you toward this phase, where emotional awareness meets real-world movement, where intention becomes action, and where connection begins taking on a more grounded, authentic form, and what comes next will build on this foundation, bringing deeper understanding, clearer communication, and stronger emotional resonance, not through force, but through alignment unfolding naturally. Remain aware as this next stage unfolds, because what's happening now carries a quiet intensity, the kind that doesn't overwhelm but steadily reshapes emotional direction, and if you've sensed a deeper awareness rising inside you, like you're seeing this situation with clearer eyes and a steadier heart, that's not coincidence, it's emotional maturity becoming active, and this maturity is important, because it changes how connection is experienced, shifting it from uncertainty into conscious participation, and during this phase your soulmate is beginning to confront their own emotional patterns, recognizing where fear once controlled decisions, where silence replaced honesty, and where avoidance created distance, and this recognition is leading them toward greater accountability, not perfection, but responsibility for how they show up, and you may notice this through more thoughtful communication, increased effort, and a willingness to engage with emotional depth rather than staying on the surface, and these changes matter, because depth creates meaning, and meaning builds connection that lasts beyond momentary attraction, and while this evolution is happening on their side, you're stepping into stronger emotional self-leadership, where you're no longer waiting to be chosen, no longer seeking validation, no longer questioning your worth, but standing firmly in your value. And this self-leadership shifts the dynamic, because it invites mutual respect instead of imbalance, and respect creates space for honesty, and honesty strengthens understanding, and understanding deepens emotional bonds, and this chain reaction is forming now, quietly but powerfully, shaping the foundation beneath what's unfolding, and this stage often feels different from earlier ones because it's not driven by emotional highs or lows, it's guided by clarity and intention brings focus, and focus supports growth, and growth creates movement that feels purposeful rather than reactive, and as this process continues, you may notice your emotional responses becoming more intentional, less impulsive reaction, more conscious choice, less fear-driven behavior, more grounded communication. These shifts reflect integration, not emotional detachment, because integration allows you to remain open while protecting your peace, and peace creates emotional stability, and emotional stability allows connection to deepen without creating chaos, and this stability is essential, because lasting relationships are built on consistency, not constant excitement, and consistency is becoming more visible now through repeated effort, reliable presence, and emotional availability, and these qualities create trust, and trust allows vulnerability to grow without fear, and vulnerability strengthens intimacy, and intimacy builds partnership, and partnership supports long-term growth, and this progression reflects alignment rather than chance, and alignment always feels steadier than emotional turbulence, calmer than uncertainty, and more sustainable than intensity alone, and as this alignment strengthens, you may feel a sense of emotional relief, like you're no longer carrying the weight of unanswered questions, because clarity is beginning to replace confusion, and clarity doesn't always come through immediate answers, sometimes it comes through emotional knowing, a sense of direction that feels right even before everything is explained, and this emotional knowing is becoming stronger now, guiding your decisions naturally, without forcing outcomes or rushing timelines. And this natural guidance helps you navigate this reconnection with wisdom rather than fear, and wisdom allows you to choose growth over comfort, truth over illusion, and alignment over attachment, and these choices shape the future of this connection in a healthier way than before, and this stage marks the transition from emotional processing into emotional embodiment, where what you've learned about yourself begins showing up in how you communicate, how you listen, how you express needs, and how you receive love. And this embodiment transforms the dynamic, because it brings authenticity to the forefront, and authenticity creates space for genuine connection instead of performance, and genuine connection allows two people to meet as they truly are, without masks or emotional armor, and that honesty strengthens trust, and trust deepens emotional bonds, and emotional bonds support partnership, and partnership creates stability, and stability allows love to grow without fear of collapse. And this foundation is being built now, not through dramatic moments, but through everyday choices, small actions, and consistent emotional presence, and these elements matter more than grand gestures, because they create sustainability, and sustainability is what turns connection into something real, something lasting, something meaningful, and as this phase continues unfolding, you may feel a stronger connection to your intuition, a clearer sense of your boundaries, and a deeper understanding of what you truly want. And these insights guide your behavior naturally, without pressure or confusion, and that guidance is essential, because it ensures that the connection you nurture aligns with your authentic self rather than old emotional patterns, and everything you've experienced up to this point has been shaping you for this stage, preparing you to engage with connection from a place of strength, awareness, and emotional balance, and what comes next will build on this foundation, bringing clearer expression, deeper emotional exchange, and more defined direction forward, not through force, but through alignment continuing to unfold naturally. Stay present as this stage deepens, because what's unfolding now carries a sense of convergence, the moment when separate emotional paths begin moving toward the same horizon, and if you felt a quiet confidence replacing uncertainty, that's not imagination, it's inner stability taking root, and this stability changes how you experience connection, because it allows you to engage without fear-driven urgency. And during this phase your soulmate is becoming more intentional with their energy. Not scattering attention, not avoiding emotional responsibility, but choosing to show care through steady involvement, thoughtful gestures, and meaningful presence, and these choices reveal growth, because growth isn't loud, it's consistent, and consistency creates reliability, and reliability builds emotional safety, and emotional safety encourages openness, and openness deepens intimacy, and intimacy strengthens bonds. And this chain reaction is quietly forming now, shaping the direction of this connection in a way that feels grounded rather than chaotic, and while this is happening on their side, you're stepping further into self-awareness, noticing patterns that no longer serve you, recognizing behaviors you're ready to release, and embracing a version of yourself that values peace, honesty, and mutual respect. And this self-awareness is powerful, because it shifts the dynamic from emotional imbalance into shared responsibility, and shared responsibility creates partnership, and partnership supports long-term growth. And this stage often feels calmer than earlier ones because it's no longer driven by longing or emotional tension, it's guided by understanding and intention creates direction, and direction builds momentum, and momentum moves connection forward naturally, without forcing outcomes. And as this momentum builds, you may notice subtle changes in how interactions feel. Conversations becoming more thoughtful, exchanges carrying more depth, moments together feeling more meaningful. These shifts signal that the connection is maturing, not fading, and maturity allows love to develop without drama, because drama comes from unresolved wounds, while growth comes from emotional responsibility, and emotional responsibility is becoming more present now on both sides, shaping how you communicate, how you listen, how you respond, and how you show care. And this mutual effort is essential, because connection thrives when both people invest energy, attention, and intention, and investment creates value, and value strengthens commitment, and commitment shapes the future. And this stage marks the transition from emotional possibility into emotional participation, where both sides begin contributing actively rather than waiting passively, and participation creates co-creation, and co-creation allows two people to build something meaningful together instead of reacting to circumstances. And this building process feels different from chasing or waiting, it feels collaborative, purposeful, and aligned with who you've become. And as this unfolds, you may notice your emotional reactions becoming softer, your communication becoming clearer, your boundaries becoming stronger without feeling rigid, and these changes reflect integration, not detachment, because integration allows you to remain open while protecting your well-being, and well-being creates emotional clarity, and emotional clarity allows you to make choices that honor your values rather than repeating old habits. And this awareness ensures that the connection you nurture reflects growth instead of past wounds. And during this phase, you may also feel moments of reflection, where you reassess what you truly want, what you're willing to invest, and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. And these reflections are important, because they guide your actions naturally, without forcing decisions. And natural decision-making feels lighter, less stressful, more aligned with your inner truth. And this inner truth is becoming more accessible now, helping you navigate this reconnection with wisdom rather than fear. And wisdom allows you to choose patience over impulse, understanding over assumption, and presence over distraction. And these choices strengthen emotional bonds, because they create space for authenticity, and authenticity invites sincerity, and sincerity builds trust, and trust deepens connection, and deep connection supports partnership, and partnership creates stability, and stability allows love to grow without collapsing under pressure. And this foundation is being built quietly, not through dramatic moments, but through everyday choices, consistent effort, and emotional presence. And these elements matter more than grand gestures, because they create sustainability, and sustainability is what turns connection into something lasting. And as this phase continues unfolding, you may feel a stronger sense of self-assurance, a clearer understanding of your emotional needs, and a deeper connection to your intuition. And these qualities guide your behavior naturally, helping you respond to this situation with balance and clarity. And that balance is essential, because it keeps the connection healthy instead of emotionally volatile, and health creates harmony, and harmony allows two people to grow together instead of pulling each other apart. And this stage is where harmony begins taking shape, not as perfection, but as mutual willingness to grow, communicate, and show up consistently, and everything you've experienced up to this point has been preparing you for this phase, shaping your emotional strength, refining your awareness, and aligning you with a healthier way of connecting, and what comes next will continue building on this foundation, bringing deeper understanding, stronger emotional resonance, and clearer direction forward, not through force, but through steady, intentional movement guided by growth. Remain grounded as this next layer comes into focus, because what's unfolding now carries a sense of inevitability mixed with choice, the moment where awareness meets decision and intention begins shaping tangible direction, and if you've noticed a quiet certainty forming inside you, a feeling that you no longer need to chase clarity because it's arriving naturally, that's not coincidence, it's emotional alignment strengthening. And this alignment changes how you experience this connection. Because it replaces doubt with understanding and replaces waiting with readiness, and during this phase your soulmate is becoming more emotionally transparent, not through perfect communication, but through greater willingness to reveal vulnerability, express sincerity, and engage with depth instead of staying on the surface. And this openness is reshaping the emotional atmosphere between you, creating space for real connection rather than imagined possibility, and you may notice this shift through subtle cues, more attentive listening, thoughtful responses, consistent effort. Not dramatic displays, but patterns that reflect genuine care, and these patterns matter, because reliability builds trust, and trust allows emotional closeness to grow without fear, and while this transformation is happening on their side, you're stepping into stronger self-assurance, where you're less willing to compromise your values, less tolerant of mixed signals, more committed to protecting your peace. And this self-assurance changes the dynamic, because it invites mutual respect instead of imbalance, and respect creates space for honesty, and honesty deepens understanding, and understanding strengthens emotional bonds, and this chain reaction is quietly forming now, shaping the foundation beneath what's emerging, and this stage often feels calmer than earlier ones because it's not driven by longing or emotional turbulence, it's guided by clarity and intention brings focus, and focus supports growth, and growth creates movement that feels purposeful rather than reactive, and as this process continues, you may notice your emotional responses becoming more measured, less impulsive reaction, more thoughtful reflection, less fear-based behavior, more grounded communication. These changes reflect integration, not emotional distance, because integration allows you to remain open while protecting your well-being, and well-being creates emotional stability, and emotional stability allows connection to deepen without creating chaos, and this stability is essential, because lasting relationships are built on consistency, not constant excitement, and consistency is becoming more visible now through repeated effort, reliable presence, and emotional availability, and these qualities create safety, and safety allows vulnerability to grow without fear of rejection, and vulnerability strengthens intimacy, and intimacy builds partnership, and partnership supports long-term growth, and this progression reflects evolution rather than chance, and evolution always feels steadier than emotional turbulence, more supportive than unpredictability, and more sustainable than intensity alone. And as this evolution continues, you may feel moments of clarity, sudden insight, or emotional release, and these experiences are signs that inner resistance is dissolving, creating space for truth to flow more freely, and once truth begins flowing, the dynamic between you will continue shifting, because honesty reshapes perception, and perception influences behavior, and behavior shapes reality, and this chain reaction is what the universe has been preparing through timing, growth, and alignment. And this stage marks the transition from emotional awareness into emotional embodiment, where what you've learned about yourself begins guiding your actions automatically, without forcing effort, and this embodiment creates authenticity, and authenticity attracts sincerity, and sincerity builds trust, and trust strengthens emotional bonds, and emotional bonds support partnership, and partnership allows long-term connection to thrive. And while this foundation continues strengthening, you may notice your intuition becoming sharper, guiding you toward healthier interaction, clearer communication, and stronger boundaries, and these intuitive signals are important, because they help you navigate this reconnection with awareness instead of reacting to old emotional triggers, and this awareness creates emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence allows connection to deepen without unnecessary conflict. And this phase isn't about rushing toward a final outcome. It's about solidifying the emotional structure that will support whatever unfolds next. And strengthening that structure requires patience, honesty, and mutual effort, not perfection, but consistency, and consistency is becoming more present now through everyday choices, thoughtful interaction, and emotional presence. And these elements create a bond that can withstand challenges instead of collapsing under pressure, and everything you've experienced up to this point has been shaping you for this stage, preparing you to engage with connection from a place of strength, clarity, and emotional balance, and what comes next will build on this foundation, bringing deeper understanding, clearer expression, and stronger emotional resonance, not through force, but through alignment continuing to unfold naturally, guiding this connection toward its next chapter. Remain fully present as this final stage opens, because what unfolds now carries completion energy mixed with new beginning frequency, the moment where inner transformation turns into lived experience, and if you've sensed a quiet assurance growing within you, a steady knowing that you're no longer standing at the edge of uncertainty, that's not imagination, it's emotional integration reaching maturity. And this maturity changes everything, because it allows you to meet connection from strength rather than need, clarity rather than confusion, awareness rather than expectation, and during this phase your soulmate is also arriving at a powerful realization, understanding that authentic connection requires presence, accountability, and consistent effort, not temporary emotion or empty promises, and this realization is shaping how they approach you, how they express care, how they show respect, and you may notice this through subtle yet meaningful actions. Reliable communication, thoughtful timing, genuine interest. Not exaggerated gestures, but steady patterns that demonstrate sincerity, and these patterns matter, because sincerity builds trust, and trust creates emotional safety, and emotional safety allows intimacy to deepen without fear, and while this evolution is happening on their side, you're stepping into a stronger version of yourself, one that no longer tolerates emotional confusion, one that honors personal boundaries, one that values peace over chaos, and this self-alignment shifts the dynamic, because it transforms connection from imbalance into partnership, and partnership requires cooperation, mutual respect, and shared responsibility, not perfection, but commitment to growth. And this commitment is becoming visible now through repeated effort, emotional presence, and intentional communication. And this stage often feels calmer than earlier phases because it's no longer fueled by longing or emotional turbulence, it's guided by understanding and grounded awareness, and grounded awareness creates stability, and stability supports long-term connection, and as this stability strengthens, you may notice your emotional responses becoming softer, your reactions more thoughtful, your communication more intentional, and these changes reflect emotional intelligence, not distance, because emotional intelligence allows you to remain open without sacrificing your well-being. And well-being creates balance, and balance supports healthy interaction, and healthy interaction allows two people to build something meaningful without emotional exhaustion, and this stage marks the transition from reconnection into conscious creation, where both sides begin shaping the future instead of reacting to the past, and shaping the future requires patience, honesty, and shared intention, not rushing, not forcing outcomes, but allowing alignment to guide direction, and alignment always feels steady, purposeful, and natural. And as this alignment continues strengthening, you may experience moments of inner clarity, sudden understanding, or emotional release, and these experiences signal that old resistance is dissolving, making space for truth to flow freely, and when truth flows freely, connection becomes authentic, and authenticity deepens bonds, and deep bonds support partnership, and partnership allows growth together instead of apart. And this growth is what sustains relationships beyond initial attraction, beyond excitement, beyond temporary emotion, and while this process continues unfolding, you may feel a stronger connection to your intuition, a clearer sense of what aligns with your values, a deeper trust in your inner guidance, and this guidance is essential, because it ensures that the connection you nurture reflects your authentic self rather than old emotional patterns, and everything you've experienced up to this point has been preparing you for this stage, refining your awareness, strengthening your emotional foundation, aligning you with a healthier way of loving, and now that preparation is becoming visible through calm confidence, emotional clarity, and intentional presence, creating a dynamic that feels real, stable, and aligned with who you've become, and what comes next will not feel chaotic or overwhelming, it will feel steady, grounded, and purposeful, because this connection is no longer built on uncertainty, it's built on awareness, mutual respect, and shared growth, and this is where true transformation happens, not in dramatic moments, but in everyday choices, consistent actions, and emotional presence, and these elements create sustainability, and sustainability is what turns connection into something lasting, meaningful, and deeply rooted, and as you step into this next chapter, remember that you are no longer waiting for love to arrive, you are participating in its creation, guided by clarity, strengthened by growth, and supported by alignment. And that is the true completion of this journey, not an ending, but a beginning shaped by intention, awareness, and emotional truth.